Hey guys, what is up? It's Hunter Vic with DragtheBar.com, and this is a new series of mine called Playing Blind with BeachJustice, when the cards don't matter. Now, we're going to start off with a little presentation before I show you the session. It's going to be a session I recorded, and I'll be doing commentary on top of it. And it's going to be exactly what it says. I had my whole cards covered the entire time. It was a 100 no limit, 50-minute long session at Black Chip, and I had my whole cards covered by my Hold'em Manager stats, and I had the chat box turned off. So I had absolutely no idea what my cards were. And we're doing this for a few reasons. The biggest of which is that there are all sorts of very important poker concepts that I think are easy to lose sight of and are easy to not concentrate on improving them and taking advantage of them at the table. Largely, when you're either multi-tabling or even just looking at your whole cards. And taking your whole cards away forces you to focus on those things. So that is what we're doing here. I wanted to clarify that because I'm sure several of you are thinking, what is this, some sort of gimmick? Why are we doing this? Of course your cards are important. I'm never going to play poker without my cards, so why should I even watch this video? Well, that may be, but the whole reason we're doing this is because I think it's a really valuable tool in improving these 5 things that are right here. The first one is position. Now, I always harp on just how important position is, whether you're playing full ring, 6-max, heads up. In a no-limit game, position is king. And it's one of those things where when all of a sudden you can't see your whole cards, you kind of realize it's one more way to really hit home how important it is. So we're going to be talking about that. Your image at the table. Now your image is everything, and it will guide your decisions in many different ways. But being aware of your image is also something that does not always come real easily. I mean, it comes with practice for sure. One way to practice recognizing your own image in your opponent's eyes is playing without whole cards. So we're going to experience that. Your frequencies. This matters a lot. Your 3-betting frequencies, your C-betting frequencies, your pre-flop raise frequency. All of these are a part of your image, but they're also something that you have to be wary of at all times. And when you're just playing the cards you have in front of you, it becomes very, very easy to completely forget about them because, of course, you're going to 3-bet aces. And, let's say you get aces, ace-king, jacks, and 10s, 4 hands in a row. You're probably going to 3-bet all of them. But, are you going to, is that going to register? Are you automatically going to think about what your opponent is going to see? Your opponent is just going to see a maniac 3-betting 4 hands in a row, even though it wouldn't even occur to you to not 3-bet them. So we're going to talk about that. Bet sizing is really important, and it's another thing. A lot of people are, bet sizing is pretty good. People are pretty good at bet sizing nowadays, but when you take away your whole cards, all of a sudden you always want them to fold because you have no idea what you have. So sizing your bets correctly to manage a good risk-reward ratio with them is very, very important. You don't want to give too much away when you're called, but you do want to make sure you maximize your fold equity. Likewise, when you're value betting a hand, you might size, and you can see your cards in a normal session, you might size your bet a little bit differently. So that's going to be another topic of discussion. And generating fold equity is the whole point here. All of these things add up to how do you generate fold equity, how do you pick your good spots to bluff, how do you evaluate whether or not you can get away with a squeeze, a 4-bet bluff, things like that. As you may expect, this video is largely, most of the play is pre-flop. Not a single hand went to showdown, but there were definitely some very interesting situations, and I'm looking forward to showing this session to you guys. Before we get there, let's finish up our presentation. Whoops, sorry about that. I'm new at this. Okay, so position. We're going to talk about this real quick. It is impossible to underestimate your position. I want you guys to think about that throughout this video because you're going to see it more and more. So, and you have to pick your spots well, especially when you're out of position. You have to be very, very selective, and you're going to think twice about raising under the gun when you can't see your hole cards. And it also forces you, when you're out of position and you can't see your hole cards, you're going to have to stay creative, because all of a sudden you don't know if you're semi-bluffing. You don't know if your donk bet has any equity at all. All you know is what your opponent thinks of you, what your position is, etc. So likewise, when you have the button, you have to use it to its maximum advantage. It's not just, this video won't just show you how tough it can be out of position, but it shows you the power of being in position. And that is just crucial. I cannot emphasize enough how important the button is and how valuable the button is. And this video is full of lots of examples. Next up, we have image. Your image dictates what you can get away with. It dictates how your opponents are going to perceive you, how they perceived you in the past, how they're going to, and as a result, how they're going to perceive you in the future. It's also important to remember that your pre-flop image carries to your post-flop play. Now, whether or not it should is not the subject here. I think we can argue all day whether or not it should carry over. A lot of people would say that it should not, but generally it does, because most people are not good enough to differentiate a pre-flop maniac from a post-flop maniac. People assume if they see someone, and generally it's correct to do that. Without a lot of information, if you see someone who's 3-betting every hand pre-flop, you can generally infer that they're going to be aggressive post-flop. But you don't always see, that's not always the case, especially with really good players. They are capable of mixing it up. They're capable of using their pre-flop game to build a post-flop image. Now, so it's something you want to be wary of. However, you want to keep it in mind that most people are going to assume that your image pre-flop applies post-flop. So we're going to keep that in mind. And as a result, we're going to think about board textures and how that plays into it. All right, so the aggression. A high level of aggression is going to lead to fear for many opponents. And when you can't see your cards, it's much easier to realize just how aggressive you have been. And so we're going to see that in play as well. It's important to remember that, and this is an easy thing to forget, but many players will wait until they have a hand to fight back. Others will not. How soon they fight back generally will indicate that, they stopped waiting for a hand and that they probably are bluffing. But these are the little things that all of a sudden they come to the forefront of the information field. We have a lot of information in a no-limit game. There's all kinds of information. When all of a sudden your biggest and most important piece of information is gone, then you no longer, then your eyes are open to everything else, and you are forced to use everything else. And that's what we're doing here. So, you see yourself through your opponent's eyes much, much better. And your image is just a crucial part of this. Okay, so frequencies. Now, this is another thing we're going to be very, very cognizant of, is how often we're pre-flop raising from each position, how often we're 3-betting from each position, who we are attacking at the table, how often we are doing it. These are all things that matter a lot, but they're all things that become secondary when we're playing our cards. Without our cards, it is impossible not to realize this stuff. This stuff becomes very evident, and all of a sudden you have to think really, really hard about, when was the last time I bluffed this guy? When was the last time I 3-bet this guy? Was this other guy paying attention to the fact that I just 3-bet this other dude 3 hands in a row? That's just really important, and it's stuff that is easy to overlook in a normal situation. You also have to vary your play. You can't, maybe you don't, and also vary your bet size. Maybe just because you got called one time in a pre-flop, maybe you c-bet the guy the last 2 times and you need to just back off. You just have to see the pot. Maybe you want to adjust your bet size on the button. Maybe you want to adjust your raise size under the gun. Maybe you want to adjust your 3-betting your 3-betting bet size. Maybe in a $50-cent game we 3-bet to 11 one time. Maybe we need to make it 13 to confuse the guy and try to throw him off. So when all of a sudden you have to make sure that you're telling a good story and all you have are your bet sizes and your timing tells, it's important to, all of your frequencies, come to the forefront. And lastly, you don't want to. One thing we're not going to do in this video is back off too much. There is a guy who starts playing back at me, and that is not a signal for me to just avoid him in the future. It is important. You can lay low for a few orbits, but if he keeps fighting back, you have to fight back. You have to fight fire with fire, and you don't want to be backing off too much ever, because then he wins. All right, so bet sizing. So as I just talked about this a minute ago, but different sizes accomplish different things, and that is very, very important as always. Bigger bets usually will have more fold equity. Very often if you want somebody to fold and you just keep betting pot, they think you look pretty serious, especially because most people don't bet pot these days. There used to be a time in online No Limit where a pot bet was standard, but you don't really see it as much anymore because people are fine-tuning their bet size. You don't bluff pot if a two-thirds pot bet is going to have the same fold equity. It's just math. So you don't see as many pot bets as you do anymore, as you used to. So betting pot these days can be a very effective bluff, and it often will get you that little extra bit of fold equity to make it that you need to make it the most plus EV play. And lastly, you want to keep them varied, but keep them balanced. You don't want to always bet one size. You don't always want to bet another size. You do want to mix them up, and you want to make sure you mix them up in each situation against each opponent. You want to keep them on their feet. So generating fold equity, that's what this is all about. This is not a video on how to value bet. This is a video on how to win money without a showdown, aka helping your red line. So what you want to do, so basically this is what we're doing is practicing, and we're practicing all these different concepts that add up to generating non-showdown winnings. All right, so all these concepts are gonna come into play, and I think that this is I think you guys will see that there is in fact a lot to focus on when we don't have our cards, and a lot of this information that might be secondary in a normal situation is gonna become very important because it's all we've got. It's all we've got to work with. People say that when a human loses eyesight, all the other senses get better, and that's fundamentally what this video is about. I'm trying to help you guys understand the importance of all this other stuff, and that it is every bit as important as knowing how to value bet your aces in a 3-bet pot, or every bit as important as being able to recognize when your opponent has you crushed, that sort of thing. So these are very important skills, and you get this stuff down, you're gonna be a very powerful poker player, and you're gonna crush. So, and I would also recommend you guys doing this on your own, but we can get to that later. All right, so without much further ado, let's get to the session. Okay, so let's get to the session. As I said, this is 100 no limit at Black Chip Poker, 6 max. I just played this, and this was a 50-minute session at these two tables the entire time. And I basically, I went into it my goal was just to play the very best I could, and not try to do anything too fancy, not try to do anything other than win money. That was my only goal. And I, of course, had to make some adjustments considering I can't see my cards. But I definitely thought that was the best approach. I wasn't trying to run like crazy fancy bluffs. I wasn't trying to show off. My only goal was to win money, because I want this to be the most applicable I can to a real situation. Even though this is a extreme example of these concepts, but often that's a really great way to learn. So with that, let's get to it. I haven't really played. I don't think I've played with any of these people before. As you can see, what I did, I made the background of my Hold'em Manager stats black instead of transparent. So I put the stats right over my cards, and then in the chat box it says you are dealt XX. But so I changed the the chat box of the stats thing, so I can't see the chat box. So I have absolutely no way to see my cards. And I didn't move these the whole time. And let's see. So I haven't really played with any of these guys before. Let's see here. Just looking at the stats before I hit play, a couple of people to take note of. We've got 11 hands on the guy with 73 VPIP, so I'm sure that's going to come down a lot. But 73 hands, he's probably it's possible this guy is a very loose recreational player. This other guy up here, 13 hands, 62 VPIP, same sort of situation. And other than that, we have a few hands on some other guys. I basically sat at this table and let it get blinded around just while I was trying to get my video set up. I didn't really play any hands. And so not huge samples, but we're gonna work with what we have. So let's go ahead and get to it. So as you can see on the right, I just posted out of position because I was trying to sit in and get this thing going. So I decided to come in for a raise. Now, one theme you'll see is I generally opened up a little less than $3 when I was in position in the cutoff of the button, and I opened for full pot when I was out of position, simply because when I was out of position, I would wanted to discourage callers, essentially. See, by out of position, I mean, like under the gun or middle position. From back there, I wanted to, discourage callers, and so I raised it a little more than I would on the button or the cutoff. Okay, so this guy is thinking. He folds. And I think Stacked Attack was playing a couple tables, so he 3-bets me right out of the gate. So what does this really mean? I just sat down. This is the first hand I've raised, and I'm getting 3-bet. Generally, that means I'm always going to give that credit, especially against an unknown. This guy's absolutely no reason to try to bluff me here, other than if maybe he's trying to set an example for someone who just got to the table. But I mean, maybe it's a pretty big long shot. Odds are he's got a hand and he's trying to get value, so I just let that one go. Now you're not going to see me raise a whole lot out of position, mostly because it's going to be extremely hard to make it plus EV. There's a reason when we can see our cards that we only raise good hands from under the gun. I mean, we just don't raise, we don't raise weak hands from the gun because we don't think it will have a positive expectation. It's just too hard to show. It's just too hard to make them show a profit. So likewise, when I have to always assume that I have 2-3 offsuit, I'm pretty much never going to do it. I do it a couple times just because I did want to keep it balanced, keep my play balanced a little bit. I didn't want to never ever raise from under the gun. That would just be kind of weird. But I also thought that if the other thing is I also thought it would be kind of like a tournament where I could steal from under the gun simply because I had been so tight. So I do it a couple times, largely for balance reasons, and I didn't want people to think that I was only playing late position hands, because then I would be giving away to them that my range is much wider in position. Everyone's going to know it's wider, but I didn't want people to think it was like so much wider it was ridiculous, as in like 50 and 0, something like that. So I did want to I did want to balance it a little bit. I did want to raise from back there. I only did it a couple times, but I thought it was important to get a couple under the gun raises in. So I tried to pick spots where I thought it would just be folded around, or if a tight player is in the blinds. Okay, so I'm getting so Stacked Attack is raising. Since he 3-bet me so early, I decided to 3-bet him right back. I decided if he wants to play an aggressive game, then we're going to go ahead and do that. I kind of just wanted to see what kind of player he was. I don't have any stats on him. I don't know if he's a tag, if he is a recreational player, whatever it may be. And he does just fold right away. That 3-bet, I did make that 3-bet $11. I'm going to rewind here for a second. So I make that $11, which is kind of would be my generally standard raise in this situation. You will see me increase that number as I 3-bet people more and more, and I need to find ways to generate more fold equity. Okay, so Stacked Attack is now, it's super important. Oh, and by the way, the reason I did this as a delayed commentary is because I didn't want to do this with live commentary because I wanted to make sure I could really, really focus and really, really think through these decisions. And I definitely feel good about how I played. And so I'm really glad I went with this format for this video. I think it's a stronger video for it. Okay, so as I was saying, so stacked attack is now raising again. So I've got my eye on this guy, mostly because he 3-bet me so quickly. And I think that he, he's looking like he's pretty aggressive at this point. Now here I'm kind of in a situation where I'm out of position in the blinds against a tough tractor over here, and he is a 64 VPIP that hasn't really come down much. Again, only 14 hands, but I kind of have to assume I got to work with the information I have here. The information I have suggests that this guy is not going to be folding a whole lot pre-flop. And if he's not going to be folding a whole lot pre-flop, it's going to be tough to move him off hands post-flop unless I want to double and triple barrel him. At the very beginning of the session, I don't really think I need to be running some big bluff out of position, a blind battle against a loose player, especially when I can't see my cards. That just does not add up to a plus EV decision, in my opinion. So I'm just going to let him have the 50 cents, and we're going to keep moving. I'm trying to use the limited information I have to find some plus EV spots, and it's definitely not easy. And I think avoiding, there are probably a couple spots in the video that might be real thin EV, and those are the ones I think I passed on probably most of them just because it was so thin that I decided to just pass on it given the information I had. But I think there are only one or two of those, and that was arguably one of them. So when I say thin, I'm talking like a razor thin. Anyway, all right. So one thing to note here, Da Vinci is this gentleman right here who has now raised twice in a row, and he's got a very irritating stack size. I seriously considered finding another table that didn't have a short stack because the short stacks obviously have a monster edge over me. So I generally am trying to avoid them whenever possible. I briefly thought about implementing a rule where if I got shoved on by a short stack, I could look at my cards to see if I could, had a hand I could call him with and hope to bust him and get him off the table. But in the end, I wanted to stick with the spirit of the video by never seeing my cards. So I did stick with that. Okay. So Da Vinci raises, this guy calls, and we have a 3-bet. Sorry about that. I plugged my phone in, and of course iTunes had to fire up, so my apologies for the interruption. Okay, so you will see me at some points, really think hard about a simple decision just like raising pre-flop, because what I'm doing there, like I just thought about it for a minute here, what I'm doing there is really thinking about what my image is primarily and thinking, can I get away with it? And I'm also thinking, what are the odds they're going to fold pre-flop? But I'm also trying to think about different flop textures and how I'm going to proceed against these guys. Flop textures, when we see a flop, the flop texture is going to play a big role in how we play. So as we see here, this guy he shoves, and I mean, there's absolutely nothing I can do. I'm not trying to gamble here. I'm trying to make money, so I just have to fold. I have a 100% range. He has, he's shoving a 33% range there. I mean, he's got an edge. There's just no way around it. So. All right, so fortunately, this Da Vinci guy does not stick around very often, or he doesn't stick around very long. It actually posed a serious dilemma for me, in that I started looking at a couple other tables to try to find a table without a short stacker, but fortunately he leaves pretty quick, so he doesn't interfere with what I'm trying to teach you guys for very long. So if you guys are like me watching this action, we're trying to gather as much information as we possibly can. So we're paying a lot of attention to stats. We're watching them as they change. We are paying attention to what our opponents are doing when we're not in the pot. For example, we see our friend Tough Tractor limp in under the gun. not a very strong play. So we can infer, some things from that. And we're just trying to, watch these guys, how they size their bets. Do they have any timing tells? We're trying to absorb as much information as we possibly can. And there's a lot out there. There's no question there's a ton of information out there. And it's a lot easier to notice it all when we can't see when we don't have to focus on our hand and our own equity and things like that. We can just focus on gathering the information that our opponents put out there for us. Okay, so here our under the gun friend limps in, and I thought this was a halfway decent spot to bluff. It's not a no-brainer, but he's got a pretty wide range. Let's say his VPIP is 40 to 60 in that range, pretty wide. You see these guys limp in with a lot of pocket pairs. A lot of times they'll limp in with like an ace-x hand. You see a ton of that. And also, medium Broadway, some suited connectors, stuff like that. So, and this board hits some of them. There's a couple gut shots. There's a couple straight draws. But a lot of ace-x hands, which will be a big chunk of his range, because there's 16 combos of every ace-x offhand. A lot of those hands that just totally whiff here. So I decided to take a stab. It's kind of dry. I would rather the 4 and the 5 not be connected, but it's like sort of dry, not super dry, but enough that I thought I could just take a stab. So I bet like 166, and he calls real quick. Now the king is a really great card to keep bluffing on, and I think I can get him off all of his ace highs, probably get him off like his pocket pairs between the 5 and the queen, hands like that. I don't expect him to fold a draw, but so I do take one more stab at it, and he calls me so quick that just tells me that. Let me try to back that up just a frame here. So watch how quick he calls me. I mean, just turbo calls me. So at this point, I'm not going to fire the river no matter what. But especially when that card rolls off, the flush, the straight, all these different hands got there. So I'm completely done with this. And my first attempt to win a hand post flop does not go well. But one thing with a guy like this, a guy who's limped in, he's loose. If you're gonna bluff once, you better be bluffing twice. Like, I think it's a terrible play to just fire once and hope he folds, because odds are he's gonna peel with any piece, anything remotely possible, anything that has any equity he's gonna peel with. So you got to fire that second bullet like almost all the time. So I definitely don't hate my play there at all. I would hate it if I'd not fired the turn, but I think that the river was a no-brainer to give up on there. And he did pot it, and I just folded. So I'm raising this Da Vinci's guy's button. I mean, he's not going to he's not going to shove every single hand, every single time I raise him. So I'm kind of just forcing him to. He does do it that time. So he's 2 for 2 now. And of course I'm going to fold. I was actually sitting here. I was like, God, should I look at my hand? I'd love to bust this guy. I'd love to get him off this table. But in the end, I really wanted to stick to my guns and try to have a winning session without seeing my cards. So notice one thing here. This guy comes out with a 4x under the gun raise. Now that's notable. That's bigger than the standard pot. And that was another table I opened that happened to pop up right over this one. Bigger than standard pot. And I think I can't remember if I threw it here or not. Did I 3-bet? I ended up just folding. I sized the 3-bet, and I decided to just, let's gather a little more information about this guy before I decide to try to take one from him post flop. He looks real strong there. He's got the bet size. He's under the gun. Let's play a little bit more with him, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so here's where I open for my first hand under the gun, and essentially I'm trying to look strong here. I think that this Da Vinci guy is gonna. Well, it's hard to get much. It's hard to. I don't know what he's thinking yet, but I am opening under the gun. My idea was to look stronger, get some folds. I also thought that by opening it for a pot bet, I have 2 guys with a half stack on my left, and I didn't. So as a result, I kind of thought they would be folding more because they don't have really great implied odds. I thought Da Vinci, if he does anything, he's going to shove or he's going to fold. I didn't really know about this guy, but he's so tight. He's only 19-15. So he has to call. He's only getting like 12 to 1. implied odds, for his stack. So I figured he would fold almost all the time. He would either shove or fold. The stacked attack, not sure yet. And then this guy, let's call him Cinch, and Cinch is going to. He's pretty tight as well, and this is the first time I've raised under the gun. So I kind of thought all that, and I had a decent shot at taking this down pre-flop. But if not, I kind of thought I could take it with a C-bet post-flop. So I did go ahead and raise here. We're also five-handed, which is going to force me to be a little bit looser than I would probably like to. When you can't see your cards, it's easy to really you want to keep it as conserve. You want to make sure you stay tight, because if you start opening it up, you're going to kill all your fold equity, and without fold equity, we can't make any money. So I really had to make sure that I did not get carried away or anything like that. And everyone does fold, so I took it down. So I've got the button here, and you better believe I'm going to be opening most of my buttons, because this is really one of my definitely the most plus EV spot at the table, and it's really my only way to really capture it. It's one of my few weapons I have here. So I'm going to raise most of my buttons. And if I need to, I can pound post flop, depending on what happens, stuff like that. So I get a texture like this, which is not exactly the kind of texture that is going to make it easy for me to win this pot. I mean, that is about as wet and dry as they come. So, a hand like, Queen 7-2, of course, I'm going to just be firing every single time. But something like this, I mean, there are so many ways he connects with this, and we already think that this guy is a loose, casual player. So there's no way he's going to be folding any piece, any draw. So at this point, I pretty much just have to give up. I mean, it's just hard to imagine having any fold equity here. So I do just check this one back. Now, one benefit of checking this board back is that a lot of times a guy will call, a guy like this, he'll call any piece on the flop, but it's a different story on the turn when he knows there's only one card to come. And when he's out of position, there's only one card to come. Even loose players, intuitively will know that, their hand is less valuable. But even if they don't, you can always just fire the river if the draws miss. And then you can, and then pick up some fold equity that way. So it's a great thing to do when you're trying to, win a hand without a showdown, especially against a less than great player. You can turn the hand into a 2-street game instead of a 3-street game. And your bluff becomes cheaper, and it becomes easier to move them off of their hand. So it can definitely, checking back a flop like this against a loose player can really be a great thing to do when you have position. So I'm using my position to turn this into a 2-street game, a 2-street post-flop situation. And he checks it to me again. So now I decide to fire, and my plan here is to fire the river for all the reasons I just talked about. And he just folds quickly. So that kind of gives us an idea that he's calling pretty wide. I kind of expected him to call, and I was going to fire most of the rivers, but he does just give that one up pretty quickly, which is good. Okay, so I open my button over here just for 2.5x. Just a little more than the minimum. It gets a little more than the minimum gets a lot more folds than the minimum does, and I can, it's a cheaper play. And I did it again to Da Vinci just because, I mean, like I said, I'm gonna stick to my guns that he's not gonna shove every single time. So I'm just gonna show him that I'm just gonna keep racing, and I'm not scared of him. So we have a newcomer to the table. Always good to see. Keeps me out of the blinds as much, which is very good considering what's going on here. So I decided to 3-bet this guy. It's very similar. It's just like the last hand where he opened to 4 under the gun. So now that I've seen this twice in a row, I'm no longer super concerned about it, that it's like real strong. Because I mean, what are the odds he's just been dealt a monster two hands in a row, and he uses the same raise size? I mean, it's certainly possible, but it's just unlikely. So now I decided to get a 3-bet in, and he raised it a little more, so I'm going to make my 3-bet a little more. I of course want him to fold, but I'm definitely not. I'm not fazed by the fact that he's under the gun, just because he's now raised 2 orbits in a row there. I do go ahead and check his PFR, and I guess my stats haven't updated yet because it's showing a 0 or an early position when. Oh, you know what that is? It's because it was a 5-handed table before, so in a 5-handed table there is no under the gun. So under the gun becomes middle position as far as holder manager is concerned. So that's what this is. Now notice he's raising 20%, very small samples of course, but more than the cutoff so far, and almost as much as the button. So that tells me that that's pretty much his whole opening range essentially from under the gun. So I'm not too concerned about that. And he does fold it pretty quick. And for what I'm doing here, he's a good guy to be 3-betting if he's always going to raise to 4, because I make an extra $1 when he folds. So it very well could be more plus EV to 3-bet that guy than some of these other guys because I make that extra $1. So we will see though. We'll see if that theory is proven or not. Okay, so notice this guy right here just posted under the gun and folded to stacked attacks raise. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, just from seeing that, probably he's not going to be the best player at the table. No good player is going to post under the gun. And even if they accidentally did, they probably wouldn't just fold. Or what they would have done is raise. Probably raise initially. Or maybe they're looking to cut their losses. Odds are not the best player here. Any good player has the wait for big blind button checked. So they're just not going to be posting under the gun. It's just never going to happen. So right away, I think this table just got looser, which is actually bad for me because I want to be playing with a bunch of tight players. Playing with a bunch of loose players is pretty much a nightmare when I can't see my whole cards. So, this is actually normally it would be really good. That'd be really great news, but not in this session. So. But, I always welcome a challenge, so it's going to force me to be creative. Okay, so stacked attack raises. And I've had pretty good luck 3-betting this table so far. And I can't remember if I did it here or if I decided to take the orbit off. Yeah, I decided to take the orbit off. You saw me size it, and I thought about it. But I 3-bet him a minute ago. I just 3-bet this guy. And like we talked about, image and frequencies. If these guys, if one of these guys is running holder manager, he's going to see these stats that I have here. A 15 3-bet, I mean, that's going to get me played at back pretty quick. So I'm looking at my 3-bet. I want to make sure that I keep this in line, which is kind of frustrating because the 3-bet is one of the only tools I have to make money here. So, but I can't, I can't go through all my bullets in the first 15 minutes of the session because then I'm going to be in trouble and I'm going to really have a hard time making any money here. So I gotta be patient and not go nuts here. I'm already really pushing. I'm already pushing it with a 15% 3-bet. So I got to cool off a little bit. And like I talked about in the intro, you can't overdo it. You do not want to overdo things, or you're going to run out of you're gonna run out of room to work. So we got to walk that fine line where they respect me. They still might fear me a little bit, but they aren't confident that I'm full of it. That's really important. You don't want them to be confident that you're totally full of crap. Okay. So our new friend has just limped the button, and if there was any doubt about this guy being a casual recreational player, those doubts have now been erased. So when he limps the button like this, so I'm going to raise a small blind to see what happens. I need to know how this guy's going to respond when I raise his limp, and this is as good a time as any because he has no opinion of me yet. So odds are he's probably going to respect my first move. That's generally how it goes, and we'll see what happens. So I do take it down, which is positive. and we're going to play a couple more hands and then finish up this, and this is going to be part 1. Okay, so I just checked my big blind here. Not exactly another really wet board that I want nothing to do with. I mean, the stacked attack did limp in though. That is worth noting for sure. But I'm not touching this. This is just out of position, 3-way pot, a board like that. I just have no chance of winning. Maybe if I bet like $20, I could win it. But again, I'm not trying to do anything goofy here. I'm trying to play, normal poker and not do anything ridiculous. I'm just trying to make money here. And plus, against a guy like this, betting 20 might not even do anything. I mean, do I think betting 20 is plus EV? No. Do I think it'll get a fold a lot? Yes. But that does not mean it's the right move, nor do I think it's plus EV. It only has to get called, once every so often to make it minus EV. So. And again, the ace, I'm just not. I want nothing to do with this pot. And neither does anybody else apparently, since no one wants to bet. Which makes you wonder what stacked attack is limping in with. And I actually won that hand. I have no idea what I won it with, but that will be one for the. We will investigate that in the conclusion of the series when we look at our stats. I'll be very interested to see there actually. I think I was looking at the other table at the time. I actually didn't notice that pocket shipped to me at the time. That's pretty funny. Okay, guys. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up with that. I'm gonna wrap this up with that hand, and gonna record part 2. And let me know what you think of the series. I always try to come up with new ways to teach this stuff, and hopefully you guys like this video. And there's a lot more action in the second part. And if you guys want to, I would encourage you to try this at home. Drop down a few levels and try to win without your whole cards. Just cover them up with your stats like I did, and just see what you can do. It really puts you in a challenging mindset. But at the end of the day, you're still playing poker and you're still doing all the same stuff that you would normally do. You're just focused on a different set of variables, and these variables are super important with or without your cards. But this is a really great way to practice implementing these things and really working on this part of the game. So let me know what you think, and I will see you guys in the forums. Thanks a lot.